Welcome to Unprecedented, a show you can only find on the Legal AF YouTube channel with Dina, Sayegh and Michael Popok. And we talk, of course, only about the United States Supreme Court, fast-track cases on their way to the United States Supreme Court, on what is shaping up to be a momentous term, for good or for bad, at the United States Supreme Court as a President Trump rages out of control, trying to challenge and make a doormat out of the federal courts all the way up to the United States Supreme Court with the help of their henchmen in Congress. Mike Johnson today making a statement that we have the power over federal courts. We could eliminate a district court if we wanted to. So he seems to understand checks and balance when it comes to helping the president out, but doesn't seem to understand the role of Congress and checks and balances to restrain a president out of control, that being left to the federal courts. So we've got a couple of cases, Dina, that you developed that I thought was a great start for today to kind of get us into it. The court is open for session, holding oral arguments. There's a new voting rights case, Louisiana versus Calais, about whether two extra black districts that were created to satisfy prior court rulings and the Voting Rights Act, has that gone too far? A bunch of white people sued because they didn't like the fact that 2 out of 6 districts in Louisiana, which does not reflect the proportion of black people in Louisiana, it's low. But that wasn't good enough for them. They think, I presume they think it's DEI, and they want their vote back, and they don't want black people to have the vote. And then there was a whole fight that broke out. We'll talk about an oral argument about, was this political and politically motivated, like to try to save Mike Johnson's seat and Steve Scalise's seat, who were come out of Louisiana, or was this race-based? And we'll talk about how the right-wingers on that court, how they handled or received the argument by the plaintiffs, the appellants, that this map should be thrown out, while the state had the weird position, a southern state had the weird position of defending a 2 black district map. We'll talk about that case. Then we've got this emergency application up to the United States Supreme Court, passing through Kagan first, and then on its way probably to the entirety of the Supreme Court, about Judge Alsop, a senior judge in San Francisco, who ordered earlier this week that Donald Trump rehire, the Trump administration rehire 16,000 probationary employees who were fired without cause or without warning, without notice. The Trump administration, they love this language of this kind of impertinent language of attacking the very basis, the very foundation of the federal court system. It's a inter-branch power grab. I feel like I'm running like Bruce Springsteen. Wasn't that a song that he wrote? It's an inter-branch power grab. It's an unjust assault on our Constitution. It's none of those things. It's a federal judge who is reviewing the actions of another branch. And that's what he gets paid to do. And we'll see what the Supreme Court's going to do. We'll talk about that new filing and the likelihood of that succeeding. And then we've got a case that you and I are watching closely. It's on our radar screen, and it's going to be, right up at the Supreme Court very, very quickly. We've been talking, the whole social media has been all abuzz about a couple of things. One, the use of a WhatsApp-like app to talk about national security issues by the Trump administration. We call that Signal Gate. That's going on. But we also have the other one from last week, just a few days ago. This administration lurches from one scandal to the next. This one is the one from last week, which is Judge Boasberg ordering out of Washington that planes return and people stop being deported unconstitutionally under an invocation of the Alien Enemies Act without due process into El Salvadorian dank, stinky jails. And him putting a stop to that. The Trump administration took an emergency application because Judge Boasberg reaffirmed his temporary restraining order, refused to vacate it, and ordered that the president stop using the Alien Enemies Act without due process because it's likely a phony invocation of war powers. They took up an appeal. First stop on the emergency appeal, 3-judge panel of the D.C. Circuit Court, led by Judge Millett. And we'll talk about what happened there and why we think this is on a fast track to the United States Supreme Court. Dina, how are you?
Okay, that was a lot. Popok. There's a lot to break down.
A lot that you're going to be running with.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the Voting Rights Act.
Let's do it.
And just to kind of frame this even in a larger picture, and then we can get down to the nitty gritty. I think that the problem in our politics, you can blame on the redistricting that the Republicans have done around the country. And the Supreme Court has over and over again not stepped in and protect voters. This is based on race, but they have done it even when it isn't based on race to have a Republican controlled district. And the divisiveness, that's where it comes from. If you have a candidate who only has to speak to Republicans, they're going to get extreme. If you have a candidate that has to speak to Republicans and Democrats, they're going to be moderate. So for me, this is the root of the problem in our politics. But like I said, the Supreme Court hasn't been willing to step in. Hopefully they will at some point, or states get better at it, like things with ranked choice voting. But let's delve into this particular lawsuit. This particular lawsuit, as you said, has to do with Louisiana. Louisiana had a 2020 census that showed that they had an increase in the Black population. 1/3 exactly of their population was Black, and they only had one congressional district, which is an obvious mismatch. So they drew a second congressional district that was majority Black district. And that is when, as they put them, they call themselves the non-African American voters, otherwise known as white, sued, saying this was racially motivated district. The reason why they are saying this is racially motivated is because under the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, you cannot enact a voting restriction or procedure that's predominantly based on race. This was done to protect Black voters. These white voters are using it to protect themselves. They're saying you are doing a voting procedure based on race. That's a violation of the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And so you have this interesting position where the argument from the Black voters who want these districts are saying, no, this is politically motivated. Politically motivated redistricting is okay under the Voting Rights Act. It's
even if it hurts Black and brown people.
Yes. And racially motivated isn't, right? So the argument is that this is the reason why needing the second map was so important is because the Black voters in the area were consistently voting for the same candidate, but were outvoted by the white voting bloc because of the way that the districts were doing it. So there was a political reason for there to be a second majority Black district because their voting rights were being diluted. And they could see that with how they voted compared to the whites, let's say, in the area that was voting. So here we have, so then Louisiana drew the second district, and then that's been tied up in court. This has actually been in front of the Supreme Court last spring. Last spring, they asked them to overturn the map, and the Supreme Court basically paused it. They said, we're going to allow this map to be in effect, let's say, for the 2024 election. And now they are finally hearing the full arguments on it. There was a Black congressional member that was elected under this map, showing that they had politically more power, more voting power, which was what this second district was supposed to address. And you're right, to the point that Louisiana doesn't necessarily want to sit and defend it. The Louisiana lawyer was like, please resolve this issue. I don't want to have to come again to the podium in the fall. They were definitely reluctantly.
I love that quote, by the way. It went one line further. He said, and if we didn't get this map right, then we don't understand your prior rulings. We did our best, in other words. It's an odd, right? It was an odd lineup where you have Louisiana, notoriously not friendly to Black people. Let's be frank. It wasn't Louisiana burning, but it was close to that in the movies. And they're defending their map, creating just 2 Black districts because they don't want to come back again. And they think that even though it's funny, this one actually looks like a gerrymander. It looks like a salamander. It looks like a snake.
Right.
It's not compact, which is usually an argument about voting rights, districting. It's not compact, but it is political because Scalise and Mike Johnson in the Congress were protected by giving them lily white voting districts to make sure that the power of the incumbency was preserved. And they created these two other black districts almost like a trade-off. If it's political, it's a political question. The Supreme Court backs out of it. What did you think from the way the oral argument went? How do you think this is going to play out?
And just real fast about the whole idea of it being a snake versus compact, because Roberts picked up on that. He's like, this looks, it's unnatural. The shape of it is unnatural. Looks like you're doing something kind of on purpose. And the Black voting group was saying, we asked for a compact district, but the state of Louisiana shaped it this way for political reasons to protect them. So this is not being shaped for race-based reasons, but political reasons. The division on the Supreme Court was pretty predictable. We had the 3 liberal justices clearly saying that this seems political and we're good with the redistricting, let's say. And we had the typical Alito, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Roberts, all being very skeptical about it. Kavanaugh in particular, the Supreme Court took up this issue under Alabama in 2022, so not that long ago, and they upheld the map that was protecting Black voters then. But in that opinion, Kavanaugh says, at some point, the protections of the Voting Rights Act have to end, right? And he brings that up again in oral arguments, which is leading people to believe not only is he maybe not going to support this second district, but he might want to push farther and undo the Voting Rights Act altogether. So it's that annoying thing Kavanaugh always does, right? With the abortion case and Dobbs, he's like, why don't you let it give it to the states? Well, you're a man and it's not your right. So obviously you don't care how the states rule. And it's same here. Like, oh, aren't we post-racial society? Like, can't we get rid of Voting Rights Act? He's the most annoying justice now almost for me on the Supreme Court because his privilege and inability to see that none of these things affect him. So he just thinks it doesn't matter and we should just wipe it away. But anyway, so it's the division is pretty predictable. I know
The Voting Rights Act is on life support anyway. It's been the bane of the MAGA Republicans' existence. They can't wait to get rid of it. Parts of it were ripped away and are basically unenforceable. Congress doesn't, because of Supreme Court precedent led by Roberts. The Congress doesn't do a darn thing about it to fix it and improve it. There's a reason it was implemented, I don't think I don't think that wound is healed with time. Even though Kavanaugh, of course, makes the suggestion that it has, but they want to kill it. Look, I don't know if you saw, we'll talk about it probably our next Unprecedented. Did you see during oral argument about the Sixth Amendment right of confrontation and all under criminal rights, that Alito suddenly, there's new historical research that maybe challenges our very notion of the Sixth Amendment. There's new historical research. That's a lie. Crazy. That's an excuse to take away a criminal defendant's rights with some newfangled, who knows what AI research.
Yeah, that was definitely an unusual segue. We'll definitely have to keep an eye on that. The fact that they are just trying to take away more rights is.
We're going to change the name of this show. We're going to change the name of this show to Unusual Segue.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's move on. What do you want to move on to? What do you want to do next? You want to do?
Let's talk about. Trump. This has just happened. Trump is asking the Supreme Court to put the pause on the reinstatement of about 16,000 employees, and as you said, Justice Kagan can decide for herself. She can ask the full court. We don't know yet if the Supreme Court is taking this or not. We can do our over and under bets on that. But essentially, what the reasoning for why they should reinstate the employees is they're saying that the Department of Office of Personnel Management has the authority to fire their own employees, but not fire employees across all the different departments. And they specify the departments. I'll just read it because the list is just stunning. Department of Veterans Affairs, Department of Treasury, Department of Agriculture, Department of Defense, Department of Energy. So this Office of Personnel Management was, firing people across the departments, which we know people following this news has known. And they're really saying they don't have that authority to do that. Trump, of course, wanting the Supreme Court to step in and save him. So what do you think? Do they take the case? What's your over under?
Yeah, I think they're going. Yeah, I think my feeling is they're going to feel there's at least, you have to have 4 votes to take the case up and 5 votes to be in your favor. Judge Alsop, who we covered at length here on Legal AF and on Midas Touch, made the right decision that there was a violation of the Constitution by the Office of Personnel Management to fire people they didn't have the authority to fire. He got lied to in his courtroom, and he said it out loud. The reason these people were fired is not because of performance-based. There was no performance evaluation at all. They were just fired because Donald Trump wanted to fire all probationary employees. Those are the ones, sounds worse than it is. Those are just the ones that have been there a year or younger, or as Judge Alsop said in his hearings, they're the lifeblood of civil service. It's how we have people become more senior, more experienced. And he's talking about the relationship between the federal government, the services they provide, and the American people. And getting rid of 16,000 of them, he said, kind of broke the trust and the bond and the connection between the government and its people. And he's troubled by that. And another judge they didn't appeal from yet, Judge Bredar in Maryland, similarly argued that you had to slow this down, and there was a whole procedure that needed to be done to get proper notice for these firings. And so it was sort of an overlapping set of decisions. Kagan is the first stop on the train because she's the associate justice that sits over the Ninth Circuit, which is California. But she's not going to. By the way, she could just go, nah.
I know. Wouldn't that be kind of nice?
Most people think, and then they have to lob another petition in. Most people think because Trump's on the other side and this particular issue that she's going to refer it over to the full 9 to decide again. This is an emergency writ. And this is only whether the Alsop injunction should be blocked while the appeal on the merits continues for 6 months or a year. Yes or no. But you have to look at the factor analysis goes to the likelihood that of success on the merits. So it does get into a little bit of substance in making the decision. I mean,
but
are there
final? But it isn't a final ruling. So it is possible.
With this right wing, there's almost automatically 4 votes to look at the case, and then they can vote. I don't know if there's going to be I think with that app, we haven't seen it yet, but the normal order of things is that the court, Kagan or the clerk, will order a response by a date certain from the opposing side, which is the AFL-CIO and the AFSCME, the largest unions representing federal workers. They'll get a brief, let's say this week or so, if they're interested in it. And then that's it. Those 2 briefs will stand, and the court will kind of internally caucus, and they'll see if there's 5 votes to do anything. And if there is, they'll either deny the application and Alito and Thomas and Gorsuch will write a dissent, or they'll say, no, we find it interesting, and they block Alsop until they can have the full appeal. They could block Alsop, which is not a great sign for how they're going to control presidential power in the future.
Although they did allow the injunction to stay the last time, they were kind of asked to step in, because it does make sense to allow the lower court to get the full briefings. And, so I could see, I feel like there's a lot of overlap. Essentially, even if you're looking at maybe some specific differences in the acts, the essential question is the executive overstepping their authority? So if you kind of look at the other case where that happened, they said enough that we want the lower court, this pause until the lower court decides. So it may be the same.
Well, by the time we come back on the air next, we'll have that development. We wanted to post everybody on it. Let's switch gears and talk about all things Judge Boasberg, who's the chief judge of the D.C. District Court. Very well respected. You wouldn't know it from how the Trump administration outside the courtroom and even inside the courtroom is bashing Jeb Boasberg. It's the same. It's an interbranch power grab. It's an unjust assault on our Constitution. It's a single federal judge. It's all the old tropes that are being trotted out. He's doing his job. He took a look at the first attempted exercise of a war power during peacetime to deport people without due process to a supermax prison in El Salvador where they paid to play. we're giving them $6 million to take these people and now, off our hands without due process. And it turns out that not everybody happens to be a part of the Tren de Agua, whatever it is, criminal narco terrorist gang. Yeah. There's some women in there. There's some 14-year-olds. There's a couple of hairdressers. There's some people that cheer on Real Madrid, the football team. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people that on the 230 that shouldn't be there, and certainly without due process. And Boasberg had said during his hearing to the lawyer Drew Ensign for the government, you understand, I wasn't ordering, my order does not mean you have to release these bad people, my words, into the general population, right? You don't have to open the prison. You don't have to like open Arkham prisons and let out all the crazies in Batman, right? You understand that. You can still hold them, just give them due process and go through a proper process with a judge on the other side before you deport them. You understood that, right? Yes. You understood my order as of 6:37 last Saturday was to turn the planes around that hadn't yet landed, right? Right. You understood that? Yeah, I understood that. Yes, right. Okay. So we knew from the hearing the judge was not going to lift his temporary restraining order, finding that there has been an extraordinary usurpation by the president of powers that he's not entitled to. Boasberg said, paraphrasing, it is a he didn't say unprecedented. He said it is I'll paraphrase it my way. It's a scary moment where a president can just point to you and say, you're an enemy combatant of the United States. I'm using my war powers, put a hood on him and shackles and get him out of here. I mean, that is a scary place to reside. Mm-hmm. And thoughtful people don't think that's correct. And so the judge put a stop to it. The Trump administration took an appeal to the 3 judges of the D.C. Circuit Court, many of which we know well from other cases involving Donald Trump, which we'll talk about in a minute. But before we get to the hearing and why we think it's on a fast track to the United States Supreme Court, Roberts, why don't you take Chief Justice Roberts 5-6 days ago, stepped out of character and did something extraordinary I've never seen in my lifetime. I did my research. It's never been done before. Mm-hmm. What did he do, and how do you think it impacts Donald Trump's conduct?
Well, those of us paying attention to the Supreme Court, and everybody here has been following us along on Unprecedented, is going to become an expert. It was huge because of the timing of it. Is in particular, he didn't speak at some conference or end of the year report in some vague way, and you didn't quite know who he was talking about, but you could kind of puzzle it together. Trump came out, he was upset about the ruling regarding the deportations, and he said his usual, we need to impeach this district judge. And Roberts, within hours, came back and said, this is not how our democracy works. If you don't like a ruling, you appeal it. You don't call for impeachment. It was the most clear rebuke of what Trump is saying that I have ever seen. And for it to come from somebody like Roberts, who doesn't want to be political, doesn't want to rock the boat. He sees himself as such an institutionalist, that he wants to gently guide the hand, right? Like that kind of person. This is like huge for him to have done that. And for those of us who are counting on the judiciary to rein in Trump, and specifically the Supreme Court to rein in Trump, I said, Trump has finally alarmed Chief Justice Roberts. And that is a good thing.
I like to think he's the hand that's rocking the cradle. Roberts, he likes to act like he's an institutionalist, but look at all the major decisions he did to help Donald Trump, from the Colorado insurrection ballot issue all the way through the immunity decision. He seems to be on the wrong end, except for Dobbs on a woman's right to choose, which was he joined but didn't write. He's written every other major decision that matters, and he's always on the hump or wrong side. Here it's funny, a week or so before on a hot take, I said, if you don't like a court decision, you don't abuse the federal judge, you appeal. You don't abuse, you appeal. And he said almost the same thing in his own way. He said 200 years of precedent. Yeah. You don't impeach, you appeal. Mm-hmm. You don't call for the impeachment.
We have a mechanism for you not agreeing with a judge.
But it didn't stop them. They can, the next day, the press secretary called out Jeb Boasberg by name, doxed him during a press conference. Pam Bondi, Attorney General, attacked him as well. Everybody who's not in front of his, it's gotten so bad that Boasberg actually took a little bit of a piss out of Drew Ensign, the lawyer for the Department of Justice, and he said, I'm seeing language used in your filings that surprises me and I've never seen before used by the government. And then he said, I've told my law clerks, you only have one thing in your life. You have your reputation and your ethics. And that is being challenged here. You need to report that back to your colleagues. And Drew Ensign said, yes, sir. Yeah. See, I don't feel sorry for him because this is a job he's chosen. But Drew Ensign is on the receiving end of the judge because everybody else is attacking him outside the courtroom extrajudicially to try to influence him. And that's why Roberts, I don't think Roberts had a choice. Roberts is like, I'm going to let the president continue to bash the feds. Let's see what Roberts does now. Probably nothing. Now that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, has said, we're looking into, I don't know if you saw the clip.
Yeah.
In fact, we'll play the clip now and then I'll let you and I respond to it. We'll roll the clip.
So there's a natural tension between the branches of the government, and we're working through that. The Judiciary Committee is looking at alternatives. One of the bills that I really like that's already been through committee was authored by Representative Darrell Issa, and that would limit the scope of federal injunctions, the ability of one individual judge to abuse the system in this way. And it would be, in my view, a dramatic improvement on that. So we'll be moving, I think, that piece of legislation and some others to address it because we have an Article I authority under the Constitution to do that. We do have authority over the federal courts, as you know. We can eliminate an entire district court. We have power funding over the courts and all these other things. But desperate times call for desperate measures, and Congress is going to act. So stay tuned for that.
All right. So there's a Speaker of the House, obviously buttons being pushed by Donald Trump, who says it's unprecedented, it's unconstitutional. We have oversight over federal judges. We can eliminate district judges and district courts if we don't like them. That's not exactly how checks and balances works, by the way. And then I thought it was remarkable that, and I've talked about this before, that Johnson just said in that clip that we want to get rid of the ability of one federal judge to enter into nationwide injunctions. He had no problem with it when Kaczmarek in Texas actually said women can't use medicated abortion because I say so nationwide. And no problem when all these crazy Texas and Louisiana judges came out against the Biden administration and stopped student loan programs and women's right to choose programs and COVID policy. No problem. Silence, crickets. But now it's their guy. And it's like, it's a power grab by one federal judge. We'll have to see what Roberts, who spent a fair amount of his time in his State of the Judiciary address on January 1, talking about the attack on the judiciary. And now it's all come to fruition, but on the Republican MAGA side.
Yeah, I think that we've talked about this. Roberts and the other Heritage Foundation are big believers in the executive unitary theory, which is a larger power for the president than we are accustomed to. But Roberts is not going to be willing to go as far in that theory with somebody like Trump, who's so out of control. And that helps us. Every time Trump calls for the impeachment of a judge, it's going to make Roberts more reluctant to give Trump power. So, because that is the tension. The tension is their philosophy versus Trump, who's the worst person to give the power to. So every time Trump says that, I'm like, good. You scare the Supreme Court. They're the only ones that can kind of stop him, or willing to at this point. Certainly Congress isn't. So I like it when he scares Roberts. And I thought Chief Justice Roberts saying that showed how alarmed he was.
Well, the Trump position is scaring another judge. We have we got a rainstorm out here. Judge Patricia Millett of the D.C. Circuit Court, 3-judge panel, who knows Donald Trump well, served on the panel that issued the ruling that he did not enjoy immunity, reversed by the United States Supreme Court, but is actually a well-considered judge. She led this 3-judge panel about whether Judge Boasberg's decision to find that Donald Trump had violated the Alien Enemies Act. There's no declaration of war, last I looked, against Venezuela and his attempt to label people enemy combatants. And then she said the thing that's getting all the headlines in the hearing yesterday. She said to Drew Ensign, the same guy I've been talking about at length there, she said, Nazis whenever you start with Nazis, you know it's where we're going. Nazis were treated better under the Alien Enemies Act in America than these particular Venezuelans. Oh, we object to that characterization, Your Honor. She went off. She spent most of her time leading a very hot bench, and it was hot because of her, understandably, where she said, and she pointed to evidence that's in the record about the pilots knowing about the order of Judge Boasberg refusing to turn the planes around after being so ordered, and the true ensign sort of painted himself into a corner for the Department of Justice because he argued, and I've heard this before. I've heard Carolyn Levitt, the world's youngest press secretary, say the same thing, which is, a single judge. It would be like if a single judge, Your Honor, ordered an aircraft carrier group in the South Pacific to redeploy she said, stop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the interfering with war plans. And okay, this is the planes were had been wheels up in violation of an order, as alleged, as I understand it. That's different. That's a judge using the power of his review
Mm-hmm.
power combined with an injunction to return to the status quo. That's not a judge interfering with the operation of the commander-in-chief and Pentagon deciding where to place an aircraft carrier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she was fired up in the attack. The other two judges, one being Henderson, who was appointed by Bush W, and Walker, he looks like the world's youngest federal judge. We'll put a photo up of him in a minute. He looks like a frat brother. Looks like Kavanaugh younger. And his big thing is he's trying to hold up his end of the bargain is, why was this filed in D.C.? Why wasn't it filed in Texas where they were processed? Which is sort of implying that if you forum shop and you put the case, this is what the Trump administration is doing.
Right.
They're shipping these people to Louisiana and Texas to deny jurisdiction to judges they don't like.
Mm-hmm.
This is forum shopping, and Walker sort of stepped into it. What did you think about the reporting so far on the oral argument? They haven't issued their order yet at the time of this recording. And what do you think? You tell me where you think they're going to go, and then we'll talk about the Supreme Court to end it.
I mean, I think they're going to say that was illegal and not lawful, let's say, under the Aliens Enemy Act. I mean, first of all, the only reason why Trump is even, or their thing is saying that there is at war, this act is his executive order, basically saying that this is an invasion, right? I mean, the idea is those people that were on that plane and deported without any due process. And when she was talking about the Nazis, she wasn't talking hyperbole. She was literally talking about when we had Nazis and they had hearings. The idea that people were deported without any due process is so scary. Of course, it should be something that a judge gets involved in. I mean, they could, it could be the vice president from another political party, right? It could be any kind of citizen. I mean, the idea that there's no legal review of an action like that. And frankly, I think there's legal review. Why shouldn't a judge be able to step in? If there was an aircraft carrier off the coast of California ready to launch, why shouldn't a judge be able to step in? I mean, we have laws for a reason. We have checks and balances for a reason. What they did was so scary. And I think that Trump is going to lose at the circuit court because of it, because I don't think they have any kind of legal standing, to stand on.
Yeah. The mainstream media reported it as, there's a split. Hard to tell. Where I'm not sure about that. Let's just put it this way. Millett is going to affirm Boasberg's injunction, and she's not going to block it while the appeal goes on, which is the only issue up on this. It's not on the substance, but it is on the substance for a judge. She's not going to block it. She's going to let Trump have his appeal through the DC. And if he doesn't, she's going to stop him from using the Alien Enemies Act. In the meantime, he's got other ways, as Boasberg laid out, he's got other ways to deport. Go through immigration court.
This was like, he did this because he liked, he's all about a reality show. He liked the shock and awe of it. He liked the drama of it. The whole images of them with their shaved heads. These poor people were used as props in his reality show.
That's
and
right.
This is
and Stephen Miller special,
100%.
Christine Nome special.
100%. And, we are still we are still a country of laws, even if they don't want us to be.
The easiest way for me to put this is, does anybody want to live in the world that Donald Trump has created? Seriously, as an American.
No, so true.
As an American, do you want to? I'm against criminals. I'm for law and order, but I'm also for due process and the rights of an accused, even if they are accused of being members of a narco-terrorist organization. If you, as I said early on, if you got the proof, bring it. They have it's an adversarial proceeding. They got a lawyer, you got a lawyer, there's a judge, and it's up or down, live or die, put them on. And they stay in Guantanamo or in the prison in the meantime. But like, to offload them to save money so that, and we're in trouble when the dictator-like president of El Salvador, Bukele, is egging Trump on in social media posts with, "Come on, man, go after judges. I did it. If you want your agenda to pass." I'm like, now he's taking instruction from the El Salvador is telling us it's the El Salvadorianification of America. I thought we were. I went to bed last night. I thought we were America.
I know. I mean, here's the thing about your comment about, like, does anybody want to live in this Trump world? And I think the problem with Republicans is they think it's not going to happen to them. They think school shootings are not going to happen to them.
Until their kids on the receiving end.
100%. Then the Republican district person suddenly decides it's a good idea to have gun control. They feel like, maybe they're not a person of color. Maybe they, aren't, have a sexual orientation that's targeted. They don't think they're the ones that are going to get rounded up on that.
They're not having babies.
They're not having, exactly. So they, the divide between Republicans and Democrats, to me, is Democrats are willing, even if it hasn't happened to you, to think about the person it could happen to. So, like, even if I think this won't happen to me, I still am worried that somebody else can get rounded up. But oftentimes Republicans are like, hey, it's not going to happen to me. So I just don't care.
I used to have a similar debate about public education. I'd hear people when they were seniors or they had enough money, they'd say, "Oh, I don't want to pay taxes to pay for public schools." And I thought, even if that were true for me, either because I could afford private school or I didn't have children or whatever, I don't want to live in a country where we're not educating the masses.
Exactly.
Where we don't have public. You want to live in a country where it's a free-for-all and Darwinian exercise. It's just the Hobbesian jungle where we don't care if people have an education, a minimum education at all, minimum health care at all. Yeah. You want to really live in, I don't want to live in that world.
No, and we're all connected. And I think Democrats see that. We're connected. Somebody who doesn't have an education, even like 2 towns away, are going to still affect me because they contribute to their community, which affects my community. Where it's a Republican, I do think it's like an isolationist thing. Like, hey, it's all about me, my bootstraps, my family. That person can like fend for themselves. But so I don't know. How do you get Republicans to have more compassion?
That's more than
Maybe
a hot take.
That's the question we have to solve.
That's more than we can accomplish in this unprecedented. But look, I think at the end of the day, back to the actual segment, I think it's going to be, Henderson was quiet for a reason. I think she, even though she's a Republican appointed person, she's more moderate. She has sided with Millett before against Donald Trump in the immunity decision, although she got a little singed because the Supreme Court threw that decision out. That was Henderson, Millett, and Michelle Childs at the time. But I think it'll be 2-1 in favor of upholding Boasberg for multiple reasons, including the attack on Boasberg can't be abided by, and I think this is a good way for them to signal that they don't like that either. So I think and then I think it's up to John Roberts. It's the first stop on that emergency application train to decide what he's going to do. I think he throws that over to the full, and we'll have to see if there's 4 votes to find that interesting or not. And the best place to do that is on Unprecedented here on the Legal AF YouTube channel. Thank you for being part of our show again with my co-anchor, Dina Sayegh. We crossed well over the 500,000 subscriber base. And in addition to Unprecedented, we got some great news. We're announcing both here and on another Midas Touch YouTube platform called Court Authorities. Dave Arenberg and a couple of other of the great contributors there are going to be coming over regularly to Legal AF and doing their work here. I think we're going to be sort of shutting down their current platform, bringing them over here. Dave's done some amazing work on Midas Touch, on the legal commentary world, knows Dina and me well, has a constitutional background as well, likes to do commentary there. I think it'd be nice to welcome him. One day we'll do an Unprecedented, bring Dave in as a guest and have him talk there. And then, like you fill in for me sometimes on Midas Touch. It's always good to have a backup in case we can't cover Unprecedented one day. Could always bring in Dave there. And he's got a couple of other contributors that I've had my eye on for a while. I'm really pleased about them joining forces, which is going to allow us to expand our programming here on Legal AF to get to the 8 to 10 a day at the intersection of law and politics videos, which I think is also important to our community building. And I think with them on, these 3 people on, Dave Arenberg really taking the heavy lift there. I know you're going to be doing some more work with us into the future. We're really, and it's important, it's an important time right now in our history at the intersection of law and politics. And I can't think of a better time for us to expand with new content contributors, right?
That sounds great.
All right. So until our next Unprecedented, Michael Popok and Dina Sayegh signing off. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.